That letter, that dense, formal envelope that lands on your desk after months of just tedious work.
Right.
You've planned your new temple, your religious organization, you've spent late nights on bylaws, getting a board together, dreaming of finally issuing those tax receipts.
And then you open it.
Rejection.
It is a devastating feeling. It really
Yeah.
is, especially when you know the genuine purpose behind it. But here's the critical context we have to start with.
Okay.
Rejections from the Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA, are incredibly common, especially for first-time applicants.
So it's not personal.
It's not personal.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is they're not rejecting these out of some kind of bias. They reject them because applicants who are trying their best keep tripping over the same very specific, identifiable hurdles every single time.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've synthesized everything we could find. Official guidance, CRA interpretations, even the failure stories. And our mission today is to give you a shortcut, a roadmap.
A cheat sheet.
Exactly. This is the cheat sheet. We are diving deep into the traps the CRA sets for temple applications, and we're giving you the practical, specific fixes you need to get it right. You're going to leave here knowing exactly where the plot holes are in your own documents.
That's right. And we're going to start with the core question that really dictates everything else.
Which is?
Is this a public charity for the benefit of the whole community, or is it, just a cleverly disguised private club?
Right. Let's get into that identity question first, because one of the most common flags is the organization that looks suspiciously like a private family club. Maybe it started with, say, the Singh and Patel families, and the application language just makes it sound like all the benefits, all the decisions are basically restricted to them and their close friends.
And that sends the reviewers reaching for the rejection stamp immediately.
Why so fast?
Because the entire legal premise of a charity is public benefit. If the organization even appears exclusive, it fails that core test right out of the gate.
So what's the fix?
The remedy is simple, but it has to be explicit. You have to demonstrate unequivocally that your doors are open to the actual general public.
So you have to spell it out.
You have to spell it out. Your documents need to say you welcome new members, you hold regular public worship services, and you run religious education programs that anyone in the community can access, not just the people who already have the keys. And that idea of integrity ties directly into another massive issue for the CRA.
The money.
The money. The suspicion that founders are treating the temple like a personal piggy bank. This is a deal breaker. They are hyper-vigilant about founders deriving personal benefit.
And what does that look like in practice?
Oh, it could be anything. Excessive salaries, free use of temple property, business deals with relatives who suddenly become vendors, or, and this is the worst one, any language that suggests you can distribute funds back to the members.
Wait, but what if the temple needs a full-time priest or an administrator? I mean, they have to be paid. Where's the line between compensating staff and that personal benefit?
That's a great question, and you have to address it head on. You state clearly in your governing documents that 0% of the organization's income is intended for personal pockets.
Zero.
If salaries are paid for legitimate work, like for clergy or staff, they have to be reasonable. They have to be verifiable and comparable to similar jobs in similar organizations.
So transparency is key.
Transparency is your defense. You need rock-solid conflict of interest policies written directly into your bylaws. Make it impossible for founders to vote on deals that benefit their own family or business.
Speaking of those foundational documents, that brings us to the next massive hurdle, the bylaws themselves.
Yes.
We call this one the cardinal sin of copy-pasted bylaws.
Yeah.
People grab a generic template off the internet, and suddenly they're creating contradictions without even realizing it.
Right. You're applying as a Hindu temple, but the generic text you copied mentions the church board or some other denomination's structure.
It just screams that you didn't even read your own documents.
It does. And beyond just customizing, there are two non-negotiable traps here. First, you need distributed control. That means a minimum of 3 directors, and ideally they should not all be immediate relatives.
They want to see community buy-in, not a family business.
Exactly. Not a private enterprise run by one family.
And then there's the second one, the one that makes everyone uncomfortable. The thing you have to plan for before you even host the first service.
Yes. The dissolution clause. This is probably the single most scrutinized point in your entire application.
What is it?
The CRA insists that if the temple ever closes down, the remaining assets, the money, the property, must be legally required to go to another registered Canadian charity.
Not back to the founders.
Never. If there is any path, even an accidental one you wrote into the bylaws, where those funds could go back to a founder or director, the application is dead, period.
This is why you say hiring a charity lawyer isn't really an expense.
It's an insurance policy.
Okay.
It saves you years of frustration and rejection letters.
Okay, so once you've established who you are and how you're governed, the next big question is, what are you actually doing?
Right. And this leads us to the problems of vague intent.
A huge red flag here is the vague purpose statement. You see applicants getting all poetic with phrases like spreading universal love and inner peace.
Or bringing people together in fellowship.
Which all sounds wonderful, but it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. While those are great goals, they tell the CRA absolutely nothing about the advancement of religion. They need concrete details to tell you, apart from, say, a secular philosophy club or a self-help retreat.
So what's the analogy you use?
I always say it's the difference between telling the government, I believe in food, versus detailing, I make butter chicken following traditional Punjabi recipes every Sunday for the public. Specificity is proof of purpose.
But hold on, isn't spreading love the core of most faiths? Why should the CRA reject that?
Because legally, their job is to ensure you're advancing religion in a way the law recognizes. So the fix isn't to use bigger, fancier words.
It's to be more specific.
Exactly. Instead of saying advance spiritual growth, detail the method. For example, we advance the Hindu faith through weekly public puja ceremonies, structured Vedic scripture study classes, and traditional festival observances. You have to paint a picture of organized, established religious practice. And if you miss that step, you often fall right into the next pitfall.
Which is looking more like a social club than a house of worship.
That's the one. If your application spends all its time describing the cultural events, the potlucks, the Diwali parties, the samosa sales, and only briefly mentions actual worship and scripture,
You've missed the mark. So what's the ratio they're looking for? How do they gauge that focus?
its expectation is pretty clear. At least 80% of your activities and your resources must be demonstrably directed toward religious purposes.
80%.
Worship, religious education, spiritual counseling. Cultural events are great for community, but you have to explicitly frame them as supporting the religious mission, not replacing it. The temple's main product has to be spiritual guidance, not just good catering.
You know, that brings up a point of skepticism we saw in the source material. We'll call Pute. Religious beliefs seem made up last Tuesday. This is when the doctrine you present seems suspiciously flexible or conveniently designed to tick tax boxes, or frankly, it just reads like a mashup of Wikipedia articles.
Right. And the CRA will be skeptical. They require a clear, consistent, coherent doctrine. You need to reference established traditions, recognize sacred texts, or denominations where that's applicable.
And if it's a new tradition.
If it is genuinely new, you have to establish its sincere connection to existing, established religious teachings. They're looking for genuine conviction, not just philosophical novelty.
And even if you have a great doctrine, great bylaws, a clear purpose, you can still stumble on this last consistency trap.
Planning to meet sometime.
Right. Phrases like, we'll hold services periodically, or we celebrate major holidays when convenient.
It just suggests you're not an ongoing, structured organization. A temple needs regularity.
So the fix is just to create a real schedule.
Create a real schedule. Detail your weekly services Sunday at 10 a.m., Wednesday study group at 7 p.m. Show the CRA your calendar for the next 6 months. Prove you are consistently running an actual temple that needs charity status to sustain its ongoing programming.
Okay, let's pivot to the purely practical paperwork failures, specifically the money.
The budget.
We call this trap the napkin budget. This is where well-meaning optimism just kills the application.
You see some wild things.
Oh, yeah. Red flags like wildly optimistic projections, budgeting for 500 regular donors in month 1 when you only have 30 founding members.
Or vague expenses like miscellaneous $50,000.
What is that? Stuff we need.
It doesn't fly. What the CRA is demanding here is realism. If you have 30 families, your budget has to reflect the income and expenses of 30 families.
So ground it in reality.
Completely. You have to show detailed line items for specific, realistic costs. Rent, utilities, insurance, supplies, compensation. They need verifiable proof you can sustain yourself.
So showing you already have some money helps.
Showing initial committed funding or a verifiable list of committed donors is a massive help. They don't want to register a charity that's just going to fold in 3 months. And that leads to the final and maybe the biggest paperwork flaw, which sort of summarizes everything. We call it the hot mess of contradictions.
This is when your documents tell different stories.
It's like a bad alibi in a detective novel. Your articles say you exist to advance the Sikh faith, but your activity section only lists general meditation and yoga.
Or your budget lists a full-time priest, but your activities describe only occasional
It
gatherings.
just doesn't add up.
So this is where you have to become your own internal detective. Before you submit, you need to read every single document side by side, and you have to actively look for plot holes.
Exactly. Do your articles, your bylaws, your activities, and your budget all tell the exact same coherent story?
If you budget $5,000 a month for rent,
The activity section better explain why you need that space. Weekly services, scripture classes, something. Consistency is the single biggest indicator of a well-organized operation.
okay, so let's imagine you've gone through this deep dive. You recognize you made 3 or 4 of these mistakes, and you have that rejection letter in your hand.
It happens?
The most important thing to remember is that a rejection is not the end of the road. It's actually a specific roadmap because the CRA tells you exactly why they said no.
You have 4 primary pathways forward. The first is the most common. Fix it and try again.
Just fix it and resubmit.
You address every single issue they detail in that letter. There's no formal waiting period, but the key is not to rush. Take the time to fundamentally fix the problems, don't just put a Band-Aid on it.
Okay, what's option 2?
Option 2 is to provide more information. If you believe it was a genuine misunderstanding, maybe you sent one document but forgot the clarifying attachment, you have 90 days to submit that clarification.
So that's for small errors, not big structural problems.
Right. Use this when it's about missing paperwork or a slight misinterpretation, not a fundamental governance flaw.
And the third path?
The third is the formal and much more drawn-out option. File an objection. This is an appeal process that can take many months. You really only pursue this if you genuinely believe the CRA made a factual or legal error in their assessment.
And finally, the fourth option, which I found really strategic.
Yes, a lot of successful groups choose this one. Keep operating as a regular nonprofit first.
So you run the temple legally, but you just can't issue tax receipts.
Exactly. And you do this because when you reapply in a year or two, you have real, verifiable numbers. You have actual attendance figures, real financial statements, proven programs, not just optimistic projections.
And that makes for a much stronger application.
A much stronger and usually successful application.
Any concluding advice on the process?
Yes. The time and money you spend hiring a charity lawyer upfront just to review those critical documents, the bylaws, the dissolution clause, it is almost always cheaper than spending a year fighting multiple rejections.
Getting it right the first time is the key investment.
It really is.
So, to summarize everything we've covered today, success in navigating this whole CRA process really is about clarity.
It comes down to proving you are specific in your doctrine, realistic in your planning, and genuinely focused on advancing religion, entirely separate from any perceived personal or tax benefits.
The process is frustrating, yes, but it forces that clarity and sustainability within your own organization.
It forces you to define who you are, what you do, and how your structure protects your community's assets for the long run.
Okay, so here is a final provocative thought for you to ponder as you start looking over your own documents. If the rule insists that 80% of activities must be religious, how might a long-established successful temple define the subtle line for audit purposes between a community dinner that genuinely supports the faith, say a scriptural discussion over a meal, and a social or cultural event that, while enjoyable, ultimately distracts from the core religious mission?
That distinction, we believe, is what defines true long-term organizational clarity.